Hello there, you're listening to the Power Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week my guest is a guy who I podcasted with on another show years ago when I had no idea what I was doing. And back then, Karl Fostvedt had a lot of people talking about him, but no real vehicle to get his name known to the masses. Fast forward a few years, and a lot has changed for the better in Karl's world. Karl's done a ton of cool shit in his career, and this podcast will take you back to 2016 and a re-edited version of the podcast I originally did with Karl to give you his backstory, and then an hour of new material with him. Before we get into it, I'm going to talk about a crazy night that I had about a week ago. So my kid has a friend over at the house, and his dad, we'll call his dad Alonzo, and Alonzo comes to the house to pick up his son, and he asks me what I'm doing on Saturday night. I tell him that I have no plans, and he's like, "Perfect, I have 4 tickets to see Static X at Corazon, and you're coming." Well, I've never seen Static X. Once I had a beer with the late Wayne Static and his crew in Cleveland at the Gravity Games, but that was a long time ago, and I didn't even see them play that night. I don't know any Static X music, but my friend tells me it's going to be an amazing show. Wayne's not here anymore, but they have the lead singer of Dope standing in for Wayne, and they're going to do the 20th anniversary of their Wisconsin Death Trip album in its entirety at the show. And I can say this is the most hardcore crowd I've been around. Lots of masks on the opening bands, and there were a lot of scary looking dudes there. When the show started, my crew got separated. I spent my time just outside of the mosh pit, and I was thrown into it for the last couple of songs. I forgot how absolutely disgusting a mosh pit can smell, and the Static X pit was one of the grossest I've ever been in. Anyways, I meet up with my buddy Alonzo after the show and his friend Peter, another guy that Alonzo knows through his kid's soccer team. These guys are totally normal dudes, and we were done with the show and we headed outside to grab an Uber. And all of a sudden, a dude shoved through the door of the bar, he's being kicked out, and another dude's following behind him. That guy's smiling, so I don't think there's anything going on. I just feel like he's following a buddy who's too drunk. But what do I know? The next thing I see, the dude that was being pushed out of the bar was being absolutely pummeled. There were bouncers around, everyone getting involved, there were people crowding around. I had no idea what was really going on, but totally interested. And Alonzo's friend Peter, who happens to be Canadian, looks at me and makes a beeline for the fight. I try to stop him. I was like, man, this has nothing to do with us, but he was gone. And this dude's only a little bigger than me, maybe 5'10", 180 pounds, and he's in there moving security, getting to the dude who's covered in blood, and giving him a little bit more space. I walk around to the other side of the action to get some video, and to do so, I had to walk behind a van. So there was 10 seconds where I didn't have my eyes on the scene. I turn the corner around the van with my phone going. The bloody guy gets up, he walks a few steps and is yelling about something and acting pretty aggressive, until Alonzo, who is a monster of a dude, comes in and takes charge. Instead of describing what happens, I'm going to let the poor audio that I recorded paint this picture.
But now my friend's got a guy in a sleeper hold,
That's a
and the guy's bleeding.
He was bleeding already.
Yeah, not for my friend.
Do you understand? Do you understand? Do you understand? You're good.
Dude, he did it. I want to see that shit. WWF, man.
So if you can make out that audio, you know that Alonzo put this stranger into a sleeper hold and put him to sleep. About 15 seconds later, Alonzo's Canadian friend Peter pulls up this guy's shirt, starts slapping him on the back just like a WWF match, and he wakes up. I walk up to my crew and I'm like, "Hey guys, will our Uber be here soon?" Alonzo's like, "It's here right now, he's down the street." We all sprint off and get in the Uber. When we get in, I'm like, "What the fuck was that all about, guys?" And these guys both love USC and maybe even do some training, and maybe they love it too much. I'm not really sure, but they're super into it, and I think that was part of the problem here. My friends were in the belief that the guy who was being kicked out of the bar, and we have no idea what he's being kicked out of the bar for, was being abused by the bouncers. And Peter jumped in to save him, but then that guy turned on everyone, and Alonzo put him to sleep. I'd never seen that happen before in person, only during wrestling, so that was pretty amazing, and that was my Saturday night out with the soccer dads. Before we get into the podcast, I want to ask you to do a few things for me. The first is tell a friend about the show. I also want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, And finally, it's Christmas time. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah. And there's no better way to prepare for these holidays than buying gifts. And you can save some money buying gifts with the codes and the ads from my sponsors. I have to thank them for making this show happen. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and the Summit at Snoqualmie. Now, let's talk to Karl Fostvedt. You are just back from the Powder Awards. Congratulations.
Thanks, bud.
You won Best Line in Return to Sender, and it was well-deserved. How was that night for you?
Appreciate it. That was a great night. I went to Aspen, just went for the night, didn't even bring my skis with me. I got a direct flight out of Salt Lake, which is about a 4-hour drive from Sun Valley, Ketchum area. Just a awesome party, but no, it was such an honor to be in that community and get recognition like that, and extremely nerve-wracking to go up on stage and deliver a speech in front of a lot of my idols, and just public speaking in general is pretty nerve-wracking stuff. So I think things went all right, but yeah, it was an extreme honor and I want more of them.
Well, you couldn't have made the public speaking any harder on yourself. You were dressed to the nines, but you decided to go minus the front tooth. And that's an interesting decision. It makes for amazing pictures, but do you have a tooth that you can put in, and did you just decide not to do that?
So yeah, I lost my tooth right after a trip to Alaska this spring, early May, and I've just decided to try to own this thing and rock it. What a lot of people will do is they get this retainer with a tooth on it called a flipper, and I just figured, hey, my name's Crazy Karl. I'm going to go ahead and rock this for a little while.
Does it ever feel really awkward when you're in public places and people just look at you like, wow, he's a derelict or a dirtbag? Because sometimes when you're missing a front tooth, people, I think, judge you.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed a few times, like walking into restaurants or something like that, people look at you a little strange, but that doesn't bug me at all. What came as a surprise was that it's really difficult to talk without a front tooth. So for the first week or two, that was quite the adjustment and kind of what I wasn't expecting. So that's kind of why I'm most looking forward to getting a tooth in there, is just to be able to talk normal again.
So you're not just owning it for good, you're going to look normal?
I'm already $3,000 in the hole getting this tooth replaced, and I still don't have a tooth. So it's a heck of a process getting a new tooth. The stage I'm at right now, I had a titanium screw drilled into my jaw. The doctor cut into my gums, drilled this screw in, and it's pretty shitty when the dentist gets the drill out.
Yeah.
And the torque wrench and all that. So yeah, they literally bore out a hole in your jaw, screw this titanium screw in, finish it off with a torque wrench, get it just right, and then they take the gum and they sew it back up over that. Now I'm in another holding pattern for, I think it takes about 4 to 6 months for this to set in. When I'm actually due for the tooth will be like in March, so at that point I'll probably just wait till May, because March and April are sending season, and the last thing I want to do is knock that thing out right after I get it fixed.
Yeah, that would totally suck. So you're back from the Powder Awards, and the last time we talked, you told me that I had to bring up the Powder Awards because we had a story together, which I'm totally blanking on. Do you remember anything about what I'm talking about?
If I did tell you a story that we need to bring up, it was you ripping the mic out of my hands at the previous Powder Awards. The reason you did that was I went up to accept an award for good company, and I proceeded to shout out Shane McConkey and Freeze Magazine, which I thought would be totally fine. Freeze is dead, so I wouldn't call them a competitor of Powder, but I don't know why you ripped the mic out of my hands. I thought that was a justified shout out.
Totally justified. I had someone in my ear at Powder Awards. That's probably someone yelling in my ear, get the fucking microphone out of his hand, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
But Shane McConkey can be yelled anywhere, and no one would have a problem with it.
That's what I thought.
Totally. So at this point, we're going to jump into the backstory that we recorded a while back. You were driving into Canada. What do you think your chances are in crossing the border with no issues?
We're about to find out. We get back to you in about 30 seconds, but I'm about a 50-50 chance here.
Oh, you're literally 30 seconds from the border?
Yep, Oregon is currently thanking me and asking me to come back soon.
Do you think we should do this while you drive through the border?
Yep, it's happening right now.
Nice. Well, if you have any problems with Border Patrol, I'm very good with them.
Did you cross that border much back in the day? I heard 10, 15 years ago, it's pretty casual to get across the border. And everything I've heard over the last 10 years has just been, you got to have your shit straight or you're going to get hassled.
It was all post 9/11, but I do have a great story. We're at Whistler, leaving my first sales meeting. I was 24 years old. And in Canada, marijuana at that point, you could get your hands on. So I had some and I was driving back across the border. I didn't want to try to cross the border with anything in my hands because that's just stupid. So pull over to the last gas station before the border and I see somebody with their car window open. They're not in their car. They're shopping inside. And I'm like, I'm going to be the coolest guy ever. And I'm just going to drop this little bag of whatever I got left in the back of their car and not think about it. And they'll be stoked when they find it. Well, I get back in the car with my ride. And she's like, so what'd you do with it? Do you throw it away? And I said, no, I put it in someone else's car. She's like, you are an idiot. That person is going to the border and they are going to get in trouble. So I have someone to apologize to somewhere and I hope they didn't go to jail.
Oh man. Well, hopefully they got through scratch free, but that's some potentially pretty bad karma there.
I don't know if it's come back around to bite me in the ass or not. But before we talk about what you're up to now, I think it's important to tell the whole story of how you became who you are today, and it starts in Ketchum, is that correct?
Yep, I was born in the old Sun Valley Hospital in 1990 and grew up in the Ketchum, Haley area, went to Wood River Middle School, Wood River High School, and after that moved out to Utah, and now I've just moved back to Idaho.
When you were growing up, there's like 6 boys in your family, right?
Yeah, I have 4 brothers and 1 sister. Yeah, our dad was pretty busy back in the day.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Does the whole family ski?
All 4 of my brothers snowboard, and my sister's the only skier out of the siblings, although my dad and my mom also ski a little bit as well. My dad's more into the Nordic skiing now.
I read somewhere that they flipped a coin pretty much to see if you were going to ski or snowboard.
Yeah, we used to have the whole family get together at this big, long dinner table, and my sister had joined the ski team, and my brother was snowboarding, and I was 7 years old, and it was my turn to figure out what I was going to do, and I had been trying out both skiing and boarding, and I didn't know how to make the decision, and nobody really wanted to push me either way, so we just said, hell, let's flip a coin, and here I am skiing 20 years later.
Did you ever pick up a snowboard, or was it just full-on skiing?
There was one year where I was just loving snowboarding, and I think I must have been 6, 7, 8 years old, right in that realm, and got out a little bit, but I was still skiing a bunch, and all my buddies were skiing, and it just felt like the right thing, so I kind of stuck with that.
When you were growing up and you're skiing, were you put into any sort of race program or anything at Sun Valley, or was it just free skiing and having fun?
Yeah, I was thrown into the Sun Valley freestyle ski team when I was 7 years old. I was the youngest kid on the team, and already when I was pretty young, I just loved jumping, and my first year on the team, I got the nickname Crazy Karl, and it's kind of stuck since then, so I've been rocking that name for 18, 19 years now, and yeah, it was a lot of fun being on the team back in the day. Wood River Middle School, starting in 6th grade, would let us out of school early 4 days a week. So I've been getting out of school at about noon since 6th grade. And yeah, I was able to do that all the way through high school. And then college was obviously able to take semesters off or structure classes around skiing. And I'm not really counting my days, but I know that since 6th grade, I've probably logged at least 100 days skiing every year consecutively since then.
That's pretty amazing that the school does that for you. And when I think about that, were there any other skiers that were able to take advantage of that program and graduate into a professional ski career? Or were you the 1% of the school that actually it worked out for?
There's a lot of good shredders that come out of Ketchum, Sun Valley area. Collins obviously is a name that comes to mind. And he ended up graduating from Wood River High School and then also went to another school, the community school. It's almost nice when you're going to school till 12 o'clock because you're in middle school and high school, you can't stand that shit and you're waiting to get out of class all day. And so when you finally get out of class, you're just so ramped up and ready to ski. You show up at the mountain and you just have so much energy. It's crazy. Now I have to figure out other ways to get yourself in that same mentality with getting that stoke that high. Because, some days you wake up and it's maybe not the perfect conditions and people are busy doing stuff and you just don't have that same kind of riled up energy from being held in a classroom for 4 or 5 hours.
Were you super into the scene and had idols that were skiers and non-new schoolers and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so Collins pointed us all in the direction of the Poor Boys films back in the day. Happy Days, Propaganda, Ready, Fire, Aim. First time a lot of us saw those DVDs was borrowing them from Collin, and so naturally we were stoked on guys like C.R. Johnson, Tanner Hall, Pep, Pollard. And for me, Pep was always someone that I really looked up to, so much to the point that I actually decided to go to the same high school that he went to. The main reason being just that Pep had gone to school there and it worked for him, and he was the coolest person in the world. And so I may as well go give it a try myself. So that brought me out to Steamboat Springs, Colorado for 2 years, where I went to the Lowell Whiteman School, and they had a program where they'd let you out to ski at like 12:30, 4 days a week, and the trend continued.
Junior and senior year of high school, you're in Steamboat?
I was my sophomore and junior, and then I came back home to graduate with all my buddies. So I did freshman and senior year back home.
Okay. There's a lot of money invested in your skiing and education for you to go to a school like that, because I know those things don't come cheap, and it worked out for you. When you graduate high school, are you a sponsored skier at that point, or are you kind of looking for sponsor? Or are you just living life? Where are you in life at that point?
I'm a little lost in life for sure. Not really having a whole lot going on and trying to figure out what to do. And I'd been out to a few competitions, US Open and stuff like that. Made it through the qualifiers a couple years, but not really made it much further than that, and wasn't able to make too much of a splash on the ski scene or with any sponsors. Scott was giving me a few pair of goggles, but that was kind of just something that was through the Sun Valley ski team. And yeah, I knew that I wanted to ski, and I always had the dream of becoming a pro skier. I wasn't one of those super nonchalant, like, oh, I didn't even have to try. I've always wanted it and been working for it. And when I graduated high school, I didn't really have a whole lot going on. That's when I decided to make the move out to Breckenridge, Colorado, and try to compete in the Dew Tour. And I was able to qualify into the Dew Tour that year and then move out to Breckenridge, and had a pretty good year out there, but wasn't really too into the whole Breckenridge scene just because everyone out there is kind of riding the same run over and over day after day. You know, it's either they go to Keystone, which is one of the flattest mountains I've ever skied, and they ride through the park, and that's a blast. Especially growing up in Sun Valley, we didn't have a terrain park, so we'd go there and be pretty blown away by that stuff. But after living out there for a year, you know, everyone just ski the same run over and over, and skiing's always been about adventure for me and getting out there and being out in the mountains and cruising around. And so I wasn't too into that routine and ended up moving out of Colorado and heading to Utah and enrolling in college out there at the Salt Lake Community College. They call it SLIC.
Okay, so when you're in Breckenridge and you're competing, you seem like a pretty chill, laid-back dude. It's a dude that likes to be in the mountains, doesn't like high-stress situations. That's my take on it. How do you do in contests? Do you feel the nerves? Do you feel like the I have to win? What is your take on entering a contest?
I grew up doing all the mogul contests, and when I was at J4 and J5, I was winning pretty much every contest I'd go to, but, you know, it wasn't the stiffest competition looking back, but I was pretty comfortable in the start gate, and so Dew Tour felt pretty good. It was really intimidating competing against people that you're looking up to, so I had a few competitions where I would just totally blow it and crash and burn, and I kind of realized that I was really comparing myself to all these people, thinking, you know, how can someone like me compete with someone like Yoon Olsen? And then I started realizing that it's not about comparing yourself to what everyone else is doing. It's just about figuring out what works for you and doing the best that you can do. And so I kind of took that mentality into Dew Tour, and I wasn't invited there, but I showed up and just begged the event organizers there to let me get a spot. And morning of, they ended up having a spot open, and they let me jump in there. I got one quick practice run and then just had to go balls to the wall. But yeah, I was able to qualify with 2 360s in my run. I think a lot of people were crashing, and I just kind of went for the more laid back style approach, and it ended up getting me into the contest. And so I was able to go out to North Star and Mount Snow that year, and that was really cool. You know, I was just starting to see those little bits of cash come in, and yeah, it started to turn around, I guess, around 2009.
When did you pick up your first ski sponsor?
So my first ski sponsor and really my first real sponsor was ON3P. And that was super cool just because that relationship actually just started with a message on newschoolers.com with the owner of ON3P contacting me. I think Scott Skis had given me a couple pairs of free skis and they were working out all right, but ON3P seemed like they had a good thing going on, and they contacted me with just a random message through Newschoolers, and I kind of went with it.
Your career is an interesting one, as a lot of people get into contests, start doing really well in contests, and then are able to go ski powder and say, I don't want to compete anymore. You did ski in contests, but you were never known as a contest skier by any means. You were just in them. But in thinking about how your career's evolved, one story I heard was that you invited yourself to the Cold Rush in 2012 and somehow got your way into there. I heard you guinea pig a railroad trestle and everybody's jaw dropped, and that kind of got the skiers fired up. How did you muscle your way into that?
I was really lucky to have a connection through my cousin Axel, who has been working with Freeride Entertainment for almost 2 decades. And Freeride is the crew that goes and films the Cold Rush. Yeah, in order to get an in with an event like that, you have to know somebody. So thankfully, I knew my cousin, and he was kind of sticking his neck out there for me, saying, hey, my cousin's got some skills. This is his dream event, anything you guys can do. And so he wasn't able to get me an invite by any means, but finally he was able to get me a job as a production assistant for him. And so I ended up just going out to Cold Rush, and, he said, hey, just show up. Maybe it'll work out and you can ski. I showed up there in Silverton and was working as a production assistant for the first day. And that was actually a crazy day. Holy shit. We rolled up. We were some of the first people to the venue that day. They gave us a bunch of snowmobiles to take up there to get all the production equipment set up. And right when we roll up to the venue, this huge chute rips out, and the powder cloud from the slide that ripped out actually went all the way through the finish area, and we all got hit with this huge, just kind of white little, almost like a dust storm type of thing from all the snow coming through. The crazy thing was there were 2 main chutes in that venue, and one of them ripped out and the other hadn't ripped out, but the one that did rip out, it took out that Red Bull half semicircle that people ski through at the end of the competition there.
Okay.
And we were on the radio, and like maybe 1 minute after the slide had finished, there were calls on the radio like, hey, like, let's get someone in there to get the Red Bull finish line thing put back up. And like 4 people rushed right into the run out of this Abbey zone. And there's this other chute that hadn't ripped out yet. So it was kind of all this hang fire sitting there. And then also this other chute that could rip out. And so after like 2 minutes of these guys trying to fix the little finish line thing, someone gets on the radio and they're like, get those guys the hell out of there. Fuck that thing. We can't have them in the run out zone. And then the owner of Silverton ended up coming through and ski cutting the other chute and deemed it all safe to ski, albeit it was pretty bare conditions that year. And they were able to have the competition. And then the next day was a slopestyle day, and they had this crazy, sketchy railroad feature that was a rail and a railroad track, and it was meant for grinding, and nobody wanted to hit it. Pep rolled through, and I kind of had noticed that no one was hitting that thing, and rails are just something that have always come kind of naturally to me. And so I was like, hey, Pep, dude. And I already asked him if he could get me into the competition, and he didn't really know me too well, and said, hey, I wish there was something I can do, but there's not really anything I can do. But then I was like, hey, dude, could I please just hit that rail? Like, I'll guinea pig it, man. I think he was kind of like sigh of relief, like, be my guest, man. Get in there. I don't want to hit it.
Yeah.
And I had my powder skis on the time. I'd never hit a rail on them, so I was a little scared that they'd catch up on that thing. But I think I was feeling a little pressure from a childhood hero. Decided to send it and ended up greasing it up and landing it perfect. And then right after that, everyone started sessioning it. And yeah, it was a pretty funky feature. I don't think it was the most well-designed rail feature of all time, but it was cool to see at least everyone hit it in some way or another. Some people just kind of went straight over it, riding the railroad track, so not grinding the thing. Few guys, Andy Mayer, Pep, Wiley Miller, Collin, a lot of those guys were grinding it and really sending it. It was pretty sketchy, man. If you kind of came too far off the left, you could just fall off this like couple 100-foot cliff. So very high consequence feature.
That had to open up a lot of eyes, and I'm sure everyone at that event knew who you were from there on out.
I wish that was the case, but I think Pep was the only one who saw that go down. But it's actually kind of a little bit of a bummer at the end of that competition. I'd got the heli ride up with all the filmers to film everything, and then I was going to go ski this real mellow run down, and I was about to ski down, and one of the guides at Silverton, I didn't really know what the whole deal was there. He starts yelling at me, hey, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just skiing down. I already skied down this run a couple times. He's like, dude, if you ski down right now, I'm calling the sheriff on you, and he'll be sitting at the bottom of the resort waiting to arrest you when you get down.
Damn.
Like, just kind of thrown off. And so the guy actually ended up making me ride the chairlift back down. I had to ride the chair down at the end of the Cold Rush. And so it was kind of a buzzkill ender to the whole thing. Wanting to be in competition so bad and going out there and helping with the production crew, and then just have such a buzzkill ender. I left that event actually a little bummed out, but it's all good. It's a cool event. I'd still like to compete in it someday if it ever came back, but I don't think it's the Shangri-La of backcountry contest. I think there's still a lot of room for evolution and progression in the realm of backcountry contest.
Now it is time for me to take a quick sponsor break, and my first sponsor is Evo, and they are a place I started shopping at way before they started supporting my podcast. Why? Because Evo does it all. Online, they have the best deals on the interwebs, and they offer free shipping on orders over $50, a low price guarantee, and the no-hassle return policy makes it easy to send things back if you have to. That's important to me. They also have stores in Seattle, Portland, Denver, Whistler, and I've been reading a whole lot about a Salt Lake City location in the works. In store, you are going to find all the brands, all the products, art, and a lot of passionate people who want to help you get dialed in for your next adventure. And for listening to the show, I've got a new deal from Evo for you on all Evo branded products, and everything they make is just as good or better than the big brand stuff. To get the deal, head on over to evo.com, shop the branded products. When you check out, enter the code POWEL20, that's all one word, and you'll save 20% on your Evo stuff. My next sponsor is Stanley, another iconic Seattle brand that has been ahead of the curve since 1913. While we all know Stanley for creating those iconic green bottles that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long, they still do that, and a whole lot more these days. They still are all about adventure, and they still are all about keeping your beverages hotter or colder than any other product ever created. I mean, I've been given just about every water bottle you can possibly imagine, and nothing comes close to a Stanley. Aside from being the leader in hot and cold, Stanley has always been the right choice when it comes to the planet. If you're still using single-use plastics for your beverages, it's time to make a change for the environment, and I'm going to make it easier than ever to do. Head on over to stanley-pmi.com, buy some stuff. I highly recommend a water bottle and a set of pint glasses, and when you check out, enter the code POWEL, the number 30, all one word, and you're done. You'll get 30% off your entire order, and when you buy something from Stanley, you are keeping the show going. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. One thing I've learned from talking to you so far is you won't let anything get in your way. You went to Breckenridge, there wasn't a spot for you on the Dew Tour, and you forced your way into the Dew Tour. You wanted to be at the Cold Rush, there wasn't an invite for you there, you forced your way into that, given the end of that trip wasn't great. I mean, that's what it takes to be successful and make things happen for yourself, and you've done that. Your early film career, it was all about urban. Anybody can go and find the videos on the internet of you skiing urban, and there's not a feature you couldn't hit, and it seems like when you land big drops, your body doesn't buckle like you see in a lot of things, and that's with all your landings, whether it's in deep POW or urban features. But there was one trip in particular, the Tracing Skylines trip to Detroit, which is a really sketchy trip, and just want to get your take a couple years after the fact of how scary that was. Was your life really in danger? And tell me about that.
Yeah, man, that was a crazy trip. There were supposed to be other Poor Boys athletes that were going to join, and there wasn't any snow out there, and so everyone ended up bailing, and I was kind of the new guy on the squad, and Cody Carter and Jasper Newton had already driven across country with the winch and all the urban gear to get out there, and just started with Poor Boys, and I wanted to keep things going, so I was just like, fuck it, dude, there'll be more POW, I'll go out there and see what happens. The first couple days, we just drove around looking at stuff, and it all looked pretty bleak and didn't seem like there was going to be much to come out of the trip. And then finally, we went into this abandoned church, and there was this sweet balcony section, and there was a big old snowbank a couple blocks away. I think Detroit had gotten like 4 inches of snow a few weeks before we showed up. So all the big parking lots where the plow had come in, there was all this old rotten snowbank snow. Finally, we were just like, we can't just sit around here doing nothing. Let's see if we can't import snow into this church and make a little bomb drop off the balcony inside there. And that ended up working out great. And from there, we just kept rolling with it. And eventually we did get a little bit of snow, and everything just escalated to the point where every day we were coming home and looking at these shots we were getting and just blown away by what we were capturing down there. And it was kind of cool. The whole attitude of the trip there kind of went from like, what the hell are we doing, to holy shit, this is actually turning out pretty cool. And Cody was working with a red camera. I think it was the first trip that he was working as a red operator, and he's definitely doing the features justice with that. And yeah, we just had got a whole lot of momentum rolling, and we kind of had a couple sketchy instances, but overall it was actually pretty low key being out there. I don't know if I'd want to do it again, but it was a cool experience.
You say it wasn't that sketchy, but there's one part they kind of focus on your face and you look totally scared, and you're driving by a truck with some guys in ski masks that you figure are going to go steal your gear. That made you guys actually stop skiing in the city for a few days, I believe. So it had to be a little more than it was just a little sketchy.
Yeah, well, there were a couple days where we were getting in over our head, and that was one of those days. And what ended up happening there was we were going to this old abandoned hospital to do a little stall on the awning outside the hospital. It kind of had this cool reflective coating. It was going to make a great photo for Nate Abbott. And showed up there, and we just start piling all these pallets and broken doors and just anything we can get our hands on. While we're doing that, Cody and one of these random new schooler kids he found via new schoolers to help us build stuff. They were off filling the truck with snow, and they were going to bring in, 4, 5, 6 truckloads of snow to fill the form of our jump. And while we were doing that, some kind of sketchy looking guy comes by and, he's like, "Hey, you guys can't be here. You got to get out of here." We kind of call his bluff and we're like, just call the cops, man. That's all right. He's like, "No, you guys shouldn't be here." He kind of drives away all sketchy, and we're kind of wondering okay, what's going on? And then another truck shows up, this guy looking a little more official, and he claims to be the building manager. And he's, "Hey, you guys got to get out of here." And so we have a few tactics for situations like that. We'll offer to pay him a couple $100 to let us stay or all that. He's not having it, and so we just call his bluff too. We're like, "All right, man, we'll just call the cops on us." And he's like, "That's not going to work out." And so we're kind of sitting there bickering with this guy, and then must have been an old late 90s diesel Ford truck, and these guys come ripping into the parking lot. They kind of drive by just perfect where they roll down the back window, and I can't remember if there were 2 or 3 guys in the back, but they all have ski masks and are strapped. Once that happened, we're like, "Oh shit, we got to get the fuck out of here." So we just throw all our gear in, and Nate Abbott's there. He's got all his flash photography gear and all that, and he's extra freaked out. And he forgot some gear. He's going out to grab it, but he was trying to move so fast he forgot to put his minivan back into park when he went to hop out of the car. So he's trying to rush around, get all his gear, hops out of the car. He starts ghost riding the whip, throws it in park, and then we have the new schoolers kid. I just hopped in his car. He's the closest vehicle, and we peeling out of the lot, and the guys in the truck try to play a game of chicken with us, getting out of the lot, dude. So we're going head on right into these guys and just barely swerve and miss them, and then we all 3 peel out in different directions. It was definitely fight or flight kind of situation, and we were just trying to get the hell out of there. In the aftermath, we ended up talking to some local shops and people, and we found out that the whole hospital was under control of the Detroit highway gang. And so they were using the facility. I don't know if they're running drugs through there or what they were doing, but it was their turf, and we were there just ignorantly trying to slam ourselves into the awning.
You don't really hear too much of that at a resort or in the backcountry, but in the cities you do.
Yeah, we were in over our heads, that's for sure. Didn't know what we were getting ourselves into.
Bunch of kids from Sun Valley in the hood in Detroit, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Bunch of white boys from Sun Valley.
Your skiing has definitely evolved. There was a period where it was mostly urban and park for you, if not all urban and park, and then I'm sure you were skiing powder when you weren't being filmed in the park. Now you've taken your skiing to finding powder and in the search of powder. This summer you took a different turn and you skied the woods of Welch's, Oregon. And hopefully that was a big paycheck for you doing XXX. What goes into a production like that?
Yeah, that was crazy. And I could go off on a pretty wild story from that if you have the time.
Let's do it.
It all started with Valhalla, which I know you're familiar with. And hopefully most of everyone who's listening to this has seen that film. If you haven't, definitely check it out. It's
amazing.
By far one of the best films that's come out in recent years, in my opinion. And I only had a very small role in that. Lucky enough to get the chance to be a part of that ski film, even though I didn't even ski any. Well, I guess we skied a little bit of real snow, but yeah. Glacier, Washington, just outside of Mount Baker, and they had this pretty cool concept where they wanted to have us skiing through the green woods of Washington in the summertime, kind of supposed to be like a dreamy sequence. And what we ended up doing is going up to Mount Baker and getting trucks full of snow and devising these shots where it would look like we're skiing through summertime woods, green, luscious, beautiful looking, but with no snow. And sometimes there actually was no snow, and other times we'd make little tracks and jumps where we'd put just an inch layer of snow on top of it and just shoot it side profile where the ferns would kind of cover that stuff up.
Okay.
Someone from XXX, the Vin Diesel Chronicle, saw that segment and contact Sweetgrass to see if they could bring those guys onto a Hollywood shoot to film Vin Diesel skiing through the jungle in the Dominican Republic. And so I got the call to go on that shoot from Mike Brown over at Sweetgrass Productions, and said it was going to be a great paying job. And I wouldn't like to consider myself a sellout by any means, but if you can make that much money in that short of a time and also gain some kind of work experience at the same time, it just seemed like a cool opportunity.
You have to sell before you sell out.
Yeah, and you got to sell out to eat out.
Yeah, true.
Anyhow, I was kind of intrigued by this job, so I agreed to go down there for kind of a consult and see what they wanted to do. And we got the call to go to the Dominican Republic, and sounded like a cool opportunity, at least worth investigating. So I ended up going out there. And when we first show up, it's kind of unclear how we're going to meet up with the whole production staff and everything. And eventually we meet up with the guys, and we're sitting at this big table with all these Hollywood big shots, and it's just like scumbag central. I hate to just speak poorly of those guys, but I just sat down at the table and was like, wow, I'm surrounded by scumbags right now. And it's very important not to confuse scumbag with dirtbag, because those are two entirely different entities.
Okay.
Dirtbags are just kind of people scraping by, doing what they got to do to live their passion, in my mind. And scumbag is someone who's just Hollywood scumbag, who knows what kind of shit they're going on. It was crazy, dude. They have all these prostitutes in the Dominican Republic, and all these people on the production crew who are getting prostitutes, and people are getting cocaine. And we're just like, what the hell do we get ourselves into? And then we go to the venue to see where they want us to shoot, and it's just like the steepest, gnarliest, cliffy, corally slope that you've ever seen. And we're just like, dude, are these guys high? Like, what the hell do they think we're gonna do here? And the main director, Dan Bradley, who's supposedly pretty well renowned, did Spider-Man stunts and all that, is just saying, hey, I want to tie you up on this winch and hang you from cables and have you jump off this cliff, and we're going to catch you before you hit. Going like, what in the hell are you guys smoking? Anyhow, we're checking out this whole set that they want us to shoot on, and there's 15 Hollywood big shots cruising around, and so I'm kind of just biting my tongue. It's day one on the scene, just hearing them all out, and then they send us back to the zone the next day to like get a better idea of what kind of features we can set up there, because we're trying to say, all right, they're paying us good money, let's see what we can figure out here.
Yep.
So we're going all around this whole cliffy, corally zone where it's like just impossible to ski, and we're just kind of thinking, all right, these guys, I think we tricked them a little too well with the Valhalla edit. And anyhow, we're cruising around trying to make the best out of the situation, and we're there all day. And about probably 5 o'clock, they have pretty short twilight there. It's so close to the equator. But we remember like, oh yeah, there's this one other zone Dan Bradley wanted us to go investigate. We're like, well, no, we're not going to do anything over there, but just to keep them happy, we'll go over and check it out. And so we kind of sneak into the woods there, and I take a little different route than the other guys did. Step in this, I hate to use the word squishy, but it's kind of squishy. Felt like I stepped in a pile of compost. And I look down, I see a bone, and I see a hatchet, and then like a zipper for a hoodie, and then it all just clicks, dude. I'm standing right next to a decomposing body.
No way. Gnarly.
And I'm just like, what the fuck, you guys? There's a dead body over here. I'm out of here. This is fuck. And they're kind of like, yeah, bullshit. And I'm like, dude, you guys don't even want this image in your mind, but if you don't believe me, go give it a look. So they walk over. I'm like 50 feet away at this point, just getting ready to GTFO.
Yeah.
So they roll over, and sure enough, they see like a Razor cell phone, like femur bone, all this stuff. And it's just me, Mike Brown, and Zach Ramross. Mike and Zach are the two Sweetgrass filmers, and this one Dominican local that was with us. And the local, I guess, picks up a stick and starts like poking the body, and then he like tries to pick the hoodie up. Oh man, Mike's gonna hate that I'm telling this story, but he's like poking the thing with a stick, and then he's trying to lift the sweater up. He like almost gets it. There's a little tension, and then the stick slips, dude, and it just flings all this decaying matter all over Mike Brown. We're like, oh man. So we like take a couple photos, get out of there, and then we get back to the road, a little walk back to the road, and then Mike realizes he forgot his notebook where he's kept everything with all the work we'd done up there that day. So at that point, it's like pitch dark. He's got to go back through this private property to go get his notebook that's next to the dead body. We kind of split crews at that point. 2 of us stayed at the road, 2 went in. And yeah, at that point, I pretty much had to call it quits on that project. I think I made like $1,000 going out there for like 4 days. And I heard that they kind of screwed me over. I think the production staff didn't like me out there too much, but I just got cold feet and had to bail on that situation after all that went down. And they ended up pulling the project off. Cody Townsend, LJ, Stranio, and Sandy Boval ended up going out there, and they all made a shit ton of cash. More than I even thought they were going to be able to make. And so it was definitely a good move on their part. I think they're only there a week or two and made like half a year's salary for a normal person.
It's pretty awesome.
So then Sweetgrass, I guess, got contacted by the Hollywood folk again to do another project that's supposed to be like an online promotion where there's like one new guy who's trying to become a XXX agent, and he has to outrun all these bad guys skiing through the jungle. And we talked him into letting us shoot it in Oregon instead of the Dominican Republic. And this project was more like Sweetgrass getting subcontracted to film the project rather than Sweetgrass getting brought onto the whole Hollywood production crew.
Okay.
So it was super low key, a lot more like the Valhalla thing, but with the whole chase scene. So LJ Stranio was the good guy, and then me, Cody Townsend, and Thane Rich were the bad guys chasing LJ through the woods. And we found a pretty good formula out there in Welch's, and there's so much decomposing plants and trees and everything out there. The ground's really spongy, and so you kind of get in there and get rid of all the rocks and stumps and suspect stuff, and then you can kind of let it rip and hot dog through all these fern bushes. So it was even a little bit of fun, and yeah, way better vibe than the Dominican Republic Hollywood thing. So I don't know if I'm gonna be doing any more Hollywood projects, but the one in Welch's with Sweetgrass producing it was cool. I mean, it was still Paramount that produced it, but it was Sweetgrass doing it.
Stick with the ski companies and the skiers, and you're around people that you're used to, and I think that's how those things work out. When they bring 10 trucks and 100 people for production, that's when things get crazy.
Yeah. Oh man, just how wasteful that whole production is. That was pretty depressing to see. Just such a chaotic shit show, the Hollywood thing. So I think I'll be avoiding those situations. But yeah, man, it was good job experience, and the Welch's thing was a blast. We had a big old house, everyone posted up, and it kind of felt like a ski trip just without all the pow.
It's time for me to take my last sponsor break, and I'm going to start out with Spy Optic. For 25 years, Spy has been making the best sunglasses and goggles on the market. Yeah, there's a lot of good products out there, but no other lens on the market comes close to Spy's contrast and mood-enhancing Happy Lens. Don't believe me? Next time you're at the shop, try a bunch of goggles on, and then put on a pair of Spys. You'll see the difference. It's a game changer. Another thing you can see is how much better Spy goggles look compared to the competition. I keep thinking the other brands will catch up in fit and finish, but they don't. For listening to the show, I'm going to make it easier than ever for you to rock a pair of Spy goggles, sunglasses, whatever. All you need to do is go to spyoptic.com, do your shopping, and when you check out, use the code POWEL20, that's all one word, and you'll get 20% off your order. My next sponsor is the Summit at Snoqualmie. They should be the choice for all Seattle skiers and snowboarders, as they are our local mountain. And here's why you should go there. There's no long road trips that waste a lot of your weekend getting to and from the mountain when you head to the summit. It's only 45 minutes away, and when you get there, you will never be turned around because the mountain has no parking for you. On top of that, the terrain is awesome. There are 4 mountains to choose from, tubing, and no big corporate pass programs that create huge lift lines. It's the smart choice for those that don't like wasting time. To find out more about getting a season pass or just a daily lift ticket, head on over to summitatsnoqualmie.com and they will have all that information for you. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been brewing my favorite Northwest beer since 2006, and since they started brewing beer, they've been supporting the sports we love. If you aren't sure about what 10 Barrel's been doing in the action sports space, well, I'll tell you. This year, they produced a ski movie with Lucas Walks called Watch This. They produced a snowboard movie with Curtis Cizik called Hold My Beer. They have signature beers that donate to causes like Protect Our Winters, and they have the dates ready for this year's Hella Big Air events, which are a party on the snow and have some big prize money for the riders. The first event is at Copper on March 2nd. Next up, it's Bachelor March 28th, and everything closes out with a new stop at Mount Hood Meadows on April 18th. If all of that isn't cool enough, the people at 10 Barrel, they're all skiers, snowboarders, and bikers. So next time you head to the store, buy some 10 Barrel and support the brand that really makes a difference in the sports we love. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. So this all leads up to 2017, and it's your endless winter. Your goal is you're going to ski every month. How many days do you get in a full year that season?
I've never done a hard count, but I think in that season I must have been right around 200. That was a good year, and I was able to stay healthy, travel to a lot of really cool destinations, and ski a lot of powder. So I've for sure skied over 100 days a year since I was in 6th grade. Been very fortunate injury-wise. The one bad injury I had a compression fracture L4 and L5 on my back. That happened on June 21st, 2014. So I was able to heal up and get ready for the next season. But yeah, knock on wood, I've been pretty lucky injury-wise in my short career here.
The next season, 2018, which is really recent because we've already talked about your history, but it's really when your career starts to change. The first thing I'll bring up is the King and Queen of Corbet's contest in Jackson Hole. Pretty much Red Bull goes to Jackson Hole. They take an iconic run and they turn it into a mini golf hole.
Mm-hmm.
You're one of those dudes that's always had to make shit happen for himself. You were getting yourself into contests and doing a bunch of things back in the day. Did you get the invite outright for this one, or did you have to get yourself invited?
Yeah, I did get the invite outright for this one. And I think a lot of people, when they got the email, it was kind of, this contest sounds iffy. And I was thinking that myself, but given my skill set and the type of skiing that I like to do, I thought this contest sounds a little iffy, but it's right up my alley. I better show up and see what I can do.
You can question it, but when you look at what Red Bull's done over the history of their brand in the US, all the events they really put their monies towards aren't iffy. They're all built for the athletes that are invited, and this event was built for someone like yourself, and they really have the finger on the pulse. They know what they're doing event-wise, so no iffiness in my opinion. But what's that whole thing like for you as an athlete? Do you show up and there's a hotel room and it's all Red Bulled out for you where you don't have to worry about a thing?
This was all self-financed, and I was up in Canada right before the event. It was kind of another just, is it worth driving all the way down there and then driving all the way back? Or, I mean, obviously now hindsight, 2 years later, we know it's a rocking event, but that first year, no one quite knew what to expect. But yeah, we just showed up and we stayed with our friend Blaine Gallivan, who lives on the Victor side of the pass. So it was me and Sander Hadley staying over there. We were team 208, which is Idaho's area code. And we would drive over from the Victor side, drive over Teton Pass every day and go ride Jackson. And finally the comp day went off and we had an awesome first year. Me and Sander went 1-2. I think Blaine ended up 4th that year, but team 208 had an awesome year 1. And year 2, Blaine ended up on the podium and I got on the podium as well. So over the course of 2 years, out of the 6 podium spots available on the men's side of the contest, 4 of those have gone to riders from Idaho.
When you get to a venue like that, being able to go full send like you guys were able to do on Corbet's is a rare occurrence where you can have people go back to back to back and there's no one in the way. You have a huge in run. Are you thinking going into it on the drive down? Are you like, oh, I'm going to 7 this? How does that even come into play?
With contests, I really just try to make sure that fun is the number one focus. I know that's a cliche way to say things, but especially for year 1, my mentality was, hey, they're going to shut down Corbet's for a week, let it fill full of powder, and then there are going to be about 20 athletes that get to ski it, and I can be one of those 20 athletes and get free tickets and just go have a blast, send it into Corbet's with a high caliber of riders. So that was kind of the mentality year 1, and I've done so many competitions over the course of my career, mostly when I was younger, but I kind of learned when I was about 20 years old that don't get all competitive. It's not about winning. Just show up and try to do your best. And for me, the one big thing was don't compare yourself to others. Like when I was younger, I'd go to the US Open, and as a little kid, we were just so intimidated by all the other riders. I think I just would psych myself out. So as I got older, I learned I just need to focus on my own riding and try to put something down that I'm going to be happy with at the end of the day. And if that puts me on the podium, great. If not, then at least I went out and had a blast.
Your winning run on that one was your second run of the day. You say 20 people are going, so that's going to be 40 landings taken by the end. Actually, what number do you go in order of riders, and do you throw something insane in the first run too?
So yeah, first year, I think I was the 7th rider to drop, which is a pretty ideal spot to go. But yeah, first run, I just did a 7. I almost landed it. I washed out to 9, started riding out switch, and then did a revert. I definitely didn't land it, but I'd never fully crashed on that run. And then I can't remember what I did on the bottom half of that first run. But yeah, run 2, we went back up, and there were probably 30 or 40 drops in the couloir by then. But there was just one little pocket of landing that was staying fresh, and thankfully no one got to it. So it was sitting there, and I was able to hone in on that in my second run. And then year 2 at Corbet's was a bummer because same thing, drove down from Canada, and being the king from the previous year, I thought maybe that would help my drop order, or at least when they would do the ping pong ball draw to see what number everyone goes, that maybe they'd let me go first on that or something. But anyhow, they put me at the very end of the pack, and sure enough, Travis Rice goes before me. He draws number 2 to drop. I drew number 24. So like right then I was just a little bit devastated, like, oh man, this is going to be rough. And thankfully Sandra Hadley was there, and he was kind of being optimistic and going, well, dude, last year when you won it, you didn't even win it till your second run. So even though you're dropping in the 20s, like, just do what you did last year and you'll be fine.
Yeah. And with that event, there's a ton of respect to be won because it's the one event where skiers and snowboarders mixed together, and it seemed like the vibe was pretty amazing. Was it a pretty cool thing to have both sports together in one event?
Yeah, it really was. And I think on paper, doing the event like that maybe doesn't quite sound like the way to go, but with this event, it just works out and it creates a sweet competition arena. And for me as a skier to get a chance to compete with Travis Rice was all time, and to come extremely close to beating him was, obviously it would have been a dream come true to be standing number 1 on the podium and have T Rice number 2. But unfortunately, it just barely didn't work out for me last year. But me and him both put runs down, and I think it was pretty split down the middle on who thought who should have won, and the Loke dog took it home. But it was just an honor to get to compete against someone like that. And he's a great competitor and just an overall good guy. So he's a lot of good energy at the top of the couloir. And then honestly, what really made the trip last year was 2 days after the event, we had a POW day at Jackson. Everyone got early ups on the tram, and we were with Trevor Kennison that day, the sit skier who sent it into Corbet's.
He's been on the podcast.
Yep, absolutely. I wish I would have won Corbet's last year, because if I did, my plan was to give the crown to Trevor, because I thought he was the true king last year, and make a donation to High Fives. But Trevor, that guy has such good energy, and it was probably the best day of my season last year, riding Jackson with him 2 days after the event. And one of the laps, we linked up with Travis Rice for a lap, and he kind of lined Trevor into a couple hits, and I got a follow cam filming him, and the stoke level was the highest I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, one of those days we'll never forget.
That is pretty awesome. And do you get to party with all these guys too? So nowadays you see Travis Rice somewhere, you guys know each other?
I haven't crossed paths with Travis since, but I have run into Trevor quite a few times, and every time we get together, we just talk, all right, what's next on the plate? And Trevor has some lofty goals this year, and I'm hoping I can get out and help him make it happen.
Awesome, man. Other than massive respect, what do you win at a contest like that?
Last year, it was either 10 or 15 grand a first. The first year, it was 8 grand. And I think I got 7K last year. So I've made 15K now, sending in the Corbet's, which is pretty helpful when you're a guy in my situation. I am at the point where I'm able to make a comfortable living, you'd say, skiing, but every dollar counts. And I've got some pretty big goals that I'm working on right now, and getting some extra financial support is always extremely helpful.
Yeah. The season that you're king, you and Lucas Walks do another project, Stray Dogs, and that's with Good Company and Jasper Newton. I think Schmeez does your art. And it's pretty much a visual documentary of your chase for powder. There's rad skiing, nice shots, and really nothing else. When you guys had a concept for this one, was that it?
That's exactly what our concept was. Don't break the mold. Let's just put together good skiing and music. We all like that. Let's keep it basic. And it had a good response and was super fun. And there are people that have taken the ski film genres in different directions and done a good job. There's also people that have done that and done a terrible job. So I don't think we were so much afraid of failing, but just going, hey, let's just keep it straightforward, simple, and putting out what we would want to see other people putting out, and the type of stuff that gets us stuff. So We've actually got a lot of talk going on right now about putting a Stray Dogs 2 together, and more than likely we're going to be working on that as a side project to MSP this year.
How many people watch the Stray Dogs project? Because I would think you can see the analytics and figure out how many people are seeing it.
That's not my area of expertise, but let me hop on YouTube here and see what we're... Definitely nothing astronomical, but we did put a big focus into creating Instagram and social content. So if you start adding up all the individual clips and all that, I think we're well over 1 million views. But on the video itself, I would guess 50,000 or something. Nothing impressive. 85,000. Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad. When you put out Stray Dogs the first time, you hadn't had big exposure in a long time. You had some internet stuff, sure, but there wasn't a ton of Karl everywhere for people to know about every year because you weren't in the big ski movies. But now that you've had a segment in MSP and a lot more of the mainstream people that aren't really core ski people, but they're going to start seeing you in that movie and knowing who you are, and then maybe they'll click on Stray Dogs too because they know your name, because nobody knows Lucas's name. I mean, let's be honest, he hasn't done that many big things. He's a sick skier, but in terms of brand building, both you and him, you're starting to do a lot right now. But your ON3P days, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they did nothing to build you as a skier and build your career, I think. But that's me. You don't need to comment back on that, I guess.
I guess the only thing I would say is just, Lucas, even though his name maybe isn't out there to the masses right now, his arrow's pointed in the right direction. He's on the right trajectory, and he just picked up that breakthrough performer at Powder Awards. So definitely feel like I'm stronger working with him, and every day that we get to go out and ski together is a blessing, and he's one of the most top-notch guys out there. So I think a couple years from now, he will be one of those people whose name is known among the masses.
It's never been about the skiing with guys on small sponsors that can't get big exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Things are pay to play. That's just kind of how these things work.
Yeah, and one thing I will mention, Scott Gaffney, MSP, filmer and editor, when I was contacted by him to get involved with MSP last year, he was extremely cool about dealing with the whole sponsor aspect of the thing, in the sense that I went like, hey, do you want me to put you in touch with anyone, or, how are we going to fund this? And he just goes, don't even worry about it. We're going to film the seg, make it happen. And Murray will talk to your sponsors and see how involved they want to be. But if those guys had not thrown a single dollar toward MSP, Gaffney basically said, doesn't matter, we're going to film with you. So that was one of the main reasons that I realized that this was a good move to get involved with someone like Gaffney, and it was an awesome experience working with him.
He's as helpful and as cool of a dude as it gets. Talking about sponsors, I might as well bring up the King of Corbet's here. You're on ON3P. And for them, and for you, that's more exposure than you've probably had in your entire career. I mean, you got a lot of exposure for the Detroit segment back in the Poor Boys days, but then your career had been not dormant, but dormant to the masses because you weren't part of any big projects.
Mm-hmm.
Then you win this big contest and everybody in the world knows your name. So it's huge for you, and it's got to be huge for ON3P. And we talked about this on our last podcast. To help build your career, you need to be on a different brand than ON3P because you've done as much as you can for them, and they can't do anything more for you. When we talked a few years back, you were as loyal as it came when it comes to sponsors. When did you start questioning whether you should stick with them or whether you should move on?
It was actually right around that same time period. I was approached by Mike Goot at K2, and this was out at Mount Hood one summer. He said, hey, Karl, my name's Mike. Pleasure to meet you. Hey, I signed Shane McConkey, and I see some of the qualities that he have. I see those qualities in you, and I really want to get you on board K2. And at this point, I'm just overwhelmed, first off, knowing that there's no way that my name deserves to be mentioned in the same conversation as Shane McConkey. And secondly, it had been a goal of mine since I was a little kid to ride on K2. I used to have K2 Public Enemies. That fall, I'd put them up on my wall and stare at them every day and just think of all the tricks and fun I was going to have on them, and tell myself, you're going to make it happen. You're going to be a K2 athlete one day. And then when Goot approached me, I was feeling just very loyal to ON3P at that point in time, and turned down a huge offer from K2. But I did mention to ON3P the K2 deal, and so ON3P stepped up with a bigger contract for me, and things were trekking along, but eventually I just felt like the loyalty I had with ON3P maybe wasn't being retributed. And they also, for being a small ski brand, had a huge list of riders, and I was chewing up a lot of budget there and figured, hey, maybe it's time to move on, get something going with another brand. And I still want them to succeed, and just realized it was time to go our separate ways.
So last year, I see something on the internet that says you're off ON3P. I text you and you say you can't talk about it. And while I would think it was a tough decision based on our conversations in the past about you being so loyal to them, you've been silent about this whole thing. There was no thank you ON3P. It was just Karl's on K2. And when that happens, it makes me think that there are things going on behind the scenes. Then I saw a post from the owner of ON3P and Damage Control. When you left, he mentioned that he put out an offer to you and he hadn't heard back to you after you sent it. So I'm guessing that all is not well behind the curtain, but you don't go all Tanner Hall on them. Is it hard to keep the frustration of whatever's going on inside and be as professional as you can be in the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was like breaking up with a girlfriend of 8 years where we had so much history, and ON3P helped me out a ton. I helped them out a ton. And it got to a point where I felt that the direction I was going with my skiing was going in a different direction than the brand was going. Checks had stopped showing up. I was a month into last season, and ON3P kept saying they were going to send me this deal and we were going to figure something out. And finally, I ended up getting a message from Will Eggington, who was the new team manager at K2, and he's just saying, hey, shot in the dark, would you have any interest in riding with K2? And since passing up that deal 4 or 5 years ago, I'd kind of regretted it down the road. And so when that opportunity came back around, I just decided to go 100% in that direction. And there was some stuff with ON3P that didn't need to be brought into the public eye. And it just felt good to have a new opportunity and walk away and put all my energy directly into this new opportunity, which has paid off big time this last year.
For sure. You go to K2, it's America's ski brand. And for you, being a Sun Valley kid, K2 has so much history there. And are you aware of all the hot dog history that K2 has back there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, especially with the K2 performers and the work that K2 did with Dick Barrymore back in the day. K2 has a huge presence out here, and you see it on the mountain. Everyone loves riding K2s out here. And I rode them as a kid and always wanted to be on the team. So it's been a dream come true. And while it was a really tough decision, especially to do this mid-season last year, mid-January, right before Corbet's was coming up, it proved to be the right move and something that I've been really happy about ever since.
Yeah, all your friends are on K2. I mean, Collins is one of your best friends. The Chris brothers, I don't know if you're friendly with those dudes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Lexi, Wing Tai, and the most important person in all of K2's company lives there, Todd Brocker. Do you have a good Todd Brocker impression?
Oh, bro, it's firing out there, bud. No, I don't know. I'm not too good at impressions, but man, Brocker is just the most stoked guy out there, and he's kind of the landlord of the K2 summer house. And even though I was riding on ON3P, when I'd go back to Hood back in the day, Uncle Brocker would always just say, come on over, come crash. He'd feed us, buy us beer or whatever. But he's such an energetic, awesome dude. Todd Brocker, yeah, it doesn't get much better than that.
You mentioned Mount Hood and Govey, and Brocker is definitely a fixture there. But I hear you one summer had a weird space like the studio, and it was something out in the woods?
Yeah, the studio. So that was living with Magnus Grainer and his buddy B-Mac, and they had set up a couple tarps in the woods. And then next thing you know, we've got a few more tents coming together and fire pits, and all of a sudden we've just got this entire compound out on Mount Hood in a pretty discreet location. And I was actually taking my final semester of college that summer. I had 2 online courses that I had to finish. And I remember my iPhone had just recently come out with a hotspot. This was in 2014. And so I took my last semester of college at the studio there in the woods, and yeah, made it through, got a degree.
Back to K2, you've always been the perfect fit for that brand. I'm happy to see you finally with someone that can amplify you the way that you need to be amplified. Are you working with the brand on everything ski and making sure that your voice is involved and heard?
I'm still would say I'm trying to find my place in the brand. Last year, being brought on mid-January, everything's already pretty set in stone for what's coming along in the future ski-wise. And I'm just focused on learning the skis that I was riding. Moving forward, yeah, I definitely want to create the ultimate bounce POW ski with K2. And I think there's going to be a lot of energy and momentum to make that happen. But yeah, that's been something that I'm working toward, but I wouldn't say that I'm on that pep level yet.
Yeah. I would think a good contract from a hard goods sponsor is something that you need, as you live in one of the most expensive places in America. Who else pays the bills for you?
Anon and Dakine, and those three are my staples.
Well, from my perspective, you need 2 to 3 more sponsors to really do what you want to do as a pro skier, because ability level is top notch. You're winning awards. Do you do all your business yourself? Are you your own agent?
Yeah, I am, and I did go the agent route a couple of years ago with hopes of this agent bringing on a non-endemic sponsor and increasing my income. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I ended up just getting a cut of my income that I was already earning taken away. But this guy did help me out a lot with organizing and producing stray dogs. So yeah, I just came to the consensus that this is all stuff I can do on my own. My goal working with the agent was that they could handle the financial stuff with the brand, which maybe isn't the most fun to discuss. And then I could just be the 100% stoked guy, just talking about skis and skiing and content. And it just turned out, in my opinion, we're just a small enough industry that that's something I'm fully capable of doing myself.
Yeah, I mean, I would think for the 3 brands that you're with, that you have established relationships with, that's great. But back then when you had an agent, you weren't the Karl that you are today. Now you've got exposure, a heavyweight ski company behind you. And I think that helps open doors when one of the big guys believes in you and they're going to start funding projects like MSP trips and everybody sees the results. An agent could probably help you out because, like I said, Sun Valley is super expensive. What's rent in Sun Valley? I'm guessing you don't own a home there.
You know what? We are very fortunate. There is a family here that owns a number of duplexes, and they're kind of like a unofficial community housing of the Sun Valley area. But yeah, I have a house 1 minute from the ski hill. It's 3-bed, 4-bath, 2-car garage, and between 3 of us, we split it. It's $1,450, so I pay $480 a month rent. But if you're looking in the newspaper for something similar, you're going to pay probably $1,500 a piece. So we're very fortunate in that regard here. And then exciting news for me is that I've made a lifelong dream come true this fall in purchasing a piece of land that I can ski and snowmobile out the back door, and got some big plans to turn this into a little bit of a shred staple. And yeah, I've just always been really inspired by those people like Travis Pastrana who have these massive compounds that they can just do all their shredding right there in their backyard. And that's been a huge goal of mine. So I won't have anything on that scale, but this is a good start and something that I think will create a lot of good content in the ski industry moving forward.
All the guys that have backyard compounds also have more than 3 sponsors. Shit, I have more than 3 sponsors. So I think you can go get more sponsors. They are definitely out there. But screw the money. The real payoff when you sign with K2 in terms of you as a skier is filming with MSP. Do you go into that first year like, this is the biggest opportunity I've ever had in my career and I'm just going to let it all hang out?
I mean, I was definitely extremely excited, and this was another goal of mine since I was 12, 13 years old, was to film a segment with Matchstick Productions. And so I would say I didn't quite go into it with that mentality, just because I feel like that style mentality puts a little too much pressure. And I just went into it, hey, I've been skiing for almost 30 years now, and let's just go do what we do and work with their filmers and just try to be an easy guy who's a hard worker, gets shots, and easy to get along with.
Is there any learning curve going on a trip with the Matchstick guys?
No, and our first trip was myself, Lucas Walks, and John Ware, and MSP just sent out their filmer, Mikey Curran. So I think the 3 of us were kind of going, all right, what should we expect out of this Mikey guy? And Mikey was probably going, all right, what's going to be going on with these guys? But within like 1 or 2 days of working together, we're all best friends, and everything just clicked up. And it was basically like we're doing what we always do, except this go around, it's going to be in theaters across the world in the fall and have more backing behind it. And I think that's been one of the coolest things working with K2. It's never been my goal to get rich from skiing, but it's just been my goal to be competitive and try to evolve the trickery in the backcountry and whatnot. But, you definitely start to realize that it doesn't hurt to have more resources behind you, especially when it comes to budget for your projects. And that's kind of a bridge I haven't really crossed yet, is working on a bigger budget project. But I guess my big goal this year is just to be able to have enough budget to work with a filmer whenever it's snowing and whenever we can get shots. And even working with MSP, I probably shot with them for about a month last winter, but there was still a handful of days where I was wishing I had more resources and someone to film with.
Yeah, I'm sure there's days that you're out there and you feel like, oh, that was a clip, and that was a clip, but we couldn't capture it.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like, in just listening to you a little bit, the money has been the big hamper on things in your career life. Like, you have a piece of land, but you need to be able to build on it. And you haven't had big exposure and you haven't had big budgets.
I will admit there are some athletes that I look at that have huge budget and huge support behind them. And I feel like I'm on that same caliber. And if I did put myself in a situation where I did get increased support and increased budgets, I'm such a hardworking guy that I think I'd be able to really make something top notch happen. And at 29 years old, I feel like I still have quite a few years left in the tank. And most importantly, I feel like I haven't peaked by any means, and hoping within the next few years I can create that project that really feels like my masterpiece and feels like I've given it my all and maxed out my potential. But right now I feel like I'm still a ways away from that point.
Part of it is those other guys that you look at who have the ability, but you think your ability is beyond. They have better business acumen, I would think, and they're better at getting the sponsors. I really think an agent would help a guy like you out who probably doesn't like calling people and asking for money.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, either that or I could just get better at asking for money. But yeah, I guess it's unlikely because that's just not really who I am. I don't know. I could try the agent route again, but it really didn't do much for me last time.
It's going to cost you 15% or something like that. You could give it another go around with someone different. Is K2 paying for you to be an MSP next year? Is that like a done deal already?
I would assume so. I just have a salary and a heli budget with them. I would imagine that's pretty much already in motion.
Was it your first trip to Alaska this year?
Yeah, first time to Alaska, April 27th and 28th.
You were only there 2 days?
Yeah, it was just a last-minute strike mission. My buddy Yancey Caldwell, who's spent a lot of time up there, gave me the last-minute call, just said, get up here. And 9 o'clock that night, I booked a flight and left at 3 or 4 a.m. the next morning. It was really cool, though, because I made sure to tell Yancey, hey, when I go to Alaska for the first time, I just want to go get my feet wet, see what it's all about. I don't want a lot of pressure filming and whatnot. I'd rather have a chance to get some experience out there, see what it's all about before having the pressure of filming. Yeah, that was an awesome trip, and the only thing I took home from that is why didn't I get up to Alaska 10 years earlier? So I think that's going to be a new annual migration for me if I can afford it and if Mother Nature cooperates.
When you first see the mountains there and see the terrain that you're going to ski, is it an intimidating experience, or have you seen a lot of shit in your day?
Oh, yeah. You're just in the bird and you're so excited, but also so nervous. And then looking at all the ice fields and bergschrunds and knowing that this is such a different land than where I grew up skiing, and knowing that I got a lot to learn there. I'm just happy to get a chance to finally get up and know that I'm going to start paying some dues. And ended up actually having an insane first day up in Alaska, where right after my fourth run, I got to the bottom of this spine line. There were 2 spines. I was up there with a guy named Chris Gavin. He was skiing one spine, I was skiing the other. It worked out where I ended up dropping first, and instead of riding out hundreds of yards like we had on our previous line, I stopped about 200 feet below the bergschrund because there was some more ice below that just looked like something to stay the hell away from. But then Chris dropped, and he ended up crossing his slough above the bergschrund, and it was a convoluted kind of double, triple bergschrund, and he pulled a full Houdini, and 1 second he was there, the next second he wasn't. I was the only one with eyes on him at that time, and just got on the radio, Chris is in the crack, we need to get up there. Started running up as fast as I could. Our guide Reggie started making his way down through a route that we had previously discussed, and me and Reggie got to the crack right about the same time. We got our beacons out because we weren't sure whether he was in the first one, the second one, or the third one, but within probably like a 10-second beacon search, we were right on top of him.
Lucky.
Started digging for him, and think we got an airway in less than 10 minutes, but thankfully he did have a hand that he got in front of his face, and it was the most gripping, scary experience of my life, but just so happy that I have the training in dealing with a situation like that and that we were able to have a successful rescue.
Was that the first real burial that you've been in the backcountry?
I've gone on a pretty gnarly ride myself back in 2017, about 2 weeks before the Corbet's contest. I almost lost my life in an accident, an avalanche, and this was the second gnarly incident that I've been a part of. But wow, it's unbelievable when you feel that power, feel that force, and deal with that stuff. Yeah, it's inspiring to make sure to train and be on point and make good decisions.
When that happens, the training pays off right away. You just go straight into the mode where you don't even have to think, you just act.
Yeah, pretty much. There's something else you tap into, that's for sure.
So that's last year. They put together the movie. What has the reaction to the movie been?
I think it's been nothing but good publicity, although everyone's like, oh yeah, someone made an article just roasting MSP on not having any females in the flick this year, which I just thought was crazy because in their flick last year it was majority women just absolutely slaying it. And I'm fairly certain that with this flick there was an effort to get a number of females involved. And for whatever reason, so-and-so was filming with TGR or Level 1 or who knows what.
I heard that as well, and it's a shame Tatum got hurt because the idea was it was going to be focused on 4 dudes and 1 girl. And while that does bring up the token girl syndrome that people have talked about before, like you said, last year MSP was like 50-50 split down the middle, and I think people just expected more from them based on last year it being so equal. They thought maybe MSP was going to do that for every movie from here on out, and maybe that's not going to happen. It's a shame Tatum got hurt, but that's just how these things go, and like you said, other people were busy and they couldn't get in MSP's movie, so I don't hold that against them. And I'm sure they'll probably plan things differently for next year. But the movie was fantastic.
And because of the backlash that MSP received when we went out to Crescent Butte for the premiere, they got everyone on their team together, editors, producers, everyone, and then all of us athletes together. And we all talked like what's planned this year and how can we have more of a woman presence in the flick. And everyone's on board. One of the ideas was to make a flick called Return to Send Her. That would be all females sending it. But I think MSP fully acknowledges that while they did put an effort to get some females involved in the flick, that unfortunately didn't happen and they screwed up in that regard. And they definitely do not want to be branded as the people that are not involving the ladies because they were the brand that was involving the ladies more than anyone the year before. So I know that's something that maybe got overlooked in the casting of this flick, but super stoked to see more ladies get involved. And I'm actually talking to the boys about getting this girl, Taylor Lundquist, involved, who's a pretty sweet park skier with a desire to get in the backcountry. And being that that's kind of my history, I want to help make it happen.
Usually think it's year 2 that you're able to land switch in the backcountry, but that's me. We'll see how she does. Who knows? But at this point, we're going to jump into something that we call inappropriate questions. I am going to talk to someone that you know. They're going to record 3 inappropriate questions. And I ended up going with one of your best friends. He's a guy with a unique name. And when I say unique name, it's a repeater. Collin Collins. He is a longtime K2 athlete. He's an awesome dude who I think seems to freak out when he gets into cities and there's too much shit going on around him. And I'm going to cue up Collin's first inappropriate question right now.
All right, right on. Collin's pretty much taught me how to ski, so seems pretty appropriate for the inappropriate.
Here we go.
Dude, guess what? Literally after I last texted you and went skiing, I fucking lost my phone in the powder.
Oh, no.
Literally just got a new one. You're the first person to call me on my new phone.
Oh, what a bummer.
Yeah, I didn't have one until about 2 hours ago. So here we go.
All right, you got question number 1 ready to go?
Sure do.
Fire away.
All right, Karl, are you still allowed to rent RVs from Cruisin' America?
I think I'm still allowed to rent RVs from Cruise America, but what happened was the Garage Masters took place in Sun Valley a number of years back. And I was going to school in Salt Lake City at the time, and a bunch of us got together and thought it'd be a good idea to rent an RV and have our whole crew roll up there together. So we ended up renting the RV. I was the only one who, for whatever reason, could put their name and credit card down for it. And about 10 of us drove from Salt Lake to Ketchum in this RV, partying the whole way up there. I drove for a good portion of the way up and then passed the reins to one of our friends, Tanner, and she drove the rest of the way, but we proceeded to take that RV to the base of the mountain. We were told that it couldn't park here, couldn't park there, all this, and there's kegs in the RV, and people are driving it around and partying, and basically this RV got completely thrashed. We ended up putting about an hour and piecing it back together and got charged a few $100 in damages, but overall, worth it. Great trip.
Always take the insurance when you do something like that.
Absolutely.
Let's go with question number 2.
Have you ever had your underwear ripped off during a wedgie?
Oh, rough. Yeah, that was a trip to Heavenly Valley as a very young kid. I was the youngest guy going with the mogul team to a contest. I was the kid who grew up with 3 older brothers. I'm pretty used to tough love and getting beat up and tormented, and maybe even put myself in a situation where I would be asking for it a little bit. But yeah, there's this guy, Nick Hanscom, who was the top dog on the ski team back in the day. He started giving me a wedgie and proceeded to continue giving me a wedgie until my boxers finally ripped off, and it was no fun. And I got really bummed out. As you can imagine, that's not a very good feeling. And I left the lodge and just saw a bus leaving Heavenly Valley and just hopped on it. And I was a 12-year-old kid, and I can't even remember where the bus took me. But yeah, the coaches were pretty mad a few hours later when they finally found me.
Huh. And do you like that kid?
At this point, yeah, I'd say for sure he was the guy doing the biggest tricks and jumping the biggest on the ski team back in the day. And I definitely hated him after that instance. But yeah, when we cross paths these days, it's nothing but good vibes and how you doing?
Who's doing bigger tricks these days, Nick?
Yep. Yeah, I'll have to remind him that next time.
You should give him a wedgie, too. We'll go with the final inappropriate question.
So Karl, if you don't know, has spent a lot of time working and building out a very cool custom trailer into like a tiny house type thing. It's really cool. He travels around. He lives for months at a time out of the thing up in British Columbia when he's filming. The thing is, it does not have a bathroom. I'd like to hear the best story about an emergency situation in which you did not have a bathroom while living in your trailer, and what did you do about it?
All right, very appropriate. Yep, I've got a pretty good-sized trailer, but there's just not enough room for everything in there, and the last thing I want to be doing is stinking the place up, doing my business in there. So for the most part, I would just go visit a bear in the woods when I had to, parked in pretty remote locations. But yeah, nothing that jumps to mind, but there are enough situations where, you know, I'm having to run out in the freezing cold when it's snowing or whatever to take care of my business that I did rip by a department store this year, and I now am the proud owner of an Ozark Trail outdoor toilet. This thing is just going to be like in case of extreme emergency. It's not very plush. It's not even as nice as a Gruber. It's basically a toilet seat with a bag that you do your business into and then chuck that away. So I got a 6-pack of the bags. Hopefully I won't be needing many of them, but yeah, if something does come up, that's what I got to deal with since I decided not to put a bathroom in the trailer. Instead, I've got a stationary bike, but if the stationary bike doesn't work out, I could always pull that out and turn it into a little bathroom area.
Have you ever shit in a bag before?
I have not at this point, no. I'd imagine that might change by this time next year.
Last year, did you have a lot of Gatorade things full of pee when you woke up at 2 a.m?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I've got like a pretty official little urinal type of thing into a bucket, so that's no issue. But if you wake up in the middle of the night, maybe you got a food bug or something and got to run out in the cold, that ain't fun.
Well, Karl, that's inappropriate questions. Your skiing was and is to me It's like Nimbus inspired but gnarlier. It's like a playful mix of creativity, lots of style, control with your butters, really bouncy. And there was a point where all of those in the know were talking about you as the next one to really blossom into that skier that everybody talks about. And it's taken 4 years, I feel like, for that to finally happen. And it has now that you're with K2 and you have more opportunities. I think you need a few more sponsors and the world will be your oyster, Mr. Fostvedt.
Well, thank you, Powell. It's been definitely one heck of a journey making the transition from street park skier to now 100% backcountry focused guy. And it's a difficult environment out there and took a lot of learning and still have a ton to learn, but very stoked on all the energy behind my skiing right now and looking forward to really evolve things to the next level. And I got a lot of tricks on my mind that I want to get after this year. And if I can put half of those to my feet, then I think we'll have a pretty good segment coming together, and definitely going to be focusing on the bounce tricks this year. So doing as much as I can with that there, and I'll be doing a lot of tomahawking, but maybe I'll land a couple tricks. We'll see.
Do you have something in mind already for the Corbet's event? Do you like, hey, I'm going to throw that next year?
Yeah, I got 2 tricks that
you don't need to share them. It's okay.
Yeah, they're super mega top secret, but yeah, I got 2 tricks that I feel pretty damn comfortable sending in there. And at the end of the day, we just have a super high level of skiing and display why skiing's so awesome.
Cool, man. Well, have a great season. Thank you for your time. And that's our podcast.
Sounds good, bud. Thanks.
So that was time with Karl Fostvedt. And if you're a brand looking for an athlete, it sounds like Karl doesn't have a ton of sponsors knocking on his door, and he's lined up to get some serious exposure over the next few years. I'm betting you could get him for a great deal, and he's one of those dudes that works harder than the rest, produces a ton of content, and that missing front tooth of his makes for some fun images to use for the marketing of Crazy Karl. But getting sponsors is all up to him, and he's not a dumb guy. He can make it happen. He just has to sell himself. And while it may not sound like a fun thing to do, he should be stoked to talk about all the shit he's done, what he's doing now, and how it can help drive sales for others. He just has to make the calls, and I know he can get all the numbers. What I'm really excited to see with Karl's career is when Karl takes his unique style to Alaska and films a part out there. And I know Karl's way more excited than me for that to happen. That's the podcast for this week. I want to thank you for listening. Ask you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on. Shoot me an email if you have any questions or concerns. I'd also like you to subscribe to the show. And finally, I want to thank my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and the Summit at Snoqualmie. Have a great Christmas and Hanukkah week, everyone.